James O'Brien on LBC. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
25 minutes to 1 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Not for the first time, and I am willing to wager not for the last time. We are catching up with Simon Marks in Washington, D.C. without really knowing where to start. But we'll begin with a story that many people listening to this may not be aware of, Simon. And to be honest with you, were it not for your Blue Sky account, which I follow religiously, I may not be aware of it myself. I speak of Nurim Amin Shah Alam. Tell me more.
It's a staggering story, this, James. A 56-year-old, nearly blind refugee, a Rohingya who had managed to escape Myanmar, Burma, and made it to the United States with his family and secure refugee status, found himself dead on the streets of Buffalo, New York, after US Border Patrol agents who had taken him in for questioning about whether he was a candidate for mass deportation, then realized that he had refugee status, so they couldn't pursue plans to try and send him off to a detention center and fly him out of the country, dropped him off not at his home, but at a donut shop in Buffalo, in the middle of one of the harshest winters that we've seen here on the eastern seaboard in a very long time. So this man, who is nearly blind, walks with a cane, cannot easily make his way around, was still wearing apparently the orange booties that he had been given when he was taken in for questioning by the Border Patrol. So not wearing any footwear that was going to do him any good in the snow and the ice that was blanketing Buffalo, is dumped at a coffee shop in Buffalo rather than being driven to his home. Now, there is a huge complex backstory. He was facing prosecution after a fracas with police officers last winter, where they claimed that he had attacked them with metal poles when they tried to move him on from a house in which he appears to have been sheltering that particular winter. He agreed a plea deal that was going to spare him, given the relatively minor nature of the offence, from the prospect of being deported after the legal action wrapped up. And yet, the Border Patrol, catching wind of the fact that there was a Rohingya immigrant who was going through some sort of criminal prosecution, thought, right, we'll nab him now and we'll get him out of the country. And then came to realise that, in fact, his refugee status protected him, and that indeed the plea deal that he was agreeing protected him, even though it wasn't finalised, didn't even give a chance for all of that to be, you know, finalised in terms of process. Yeah. So they then realise they can't keep him. So and instead of taking him to his house, this vulnerable man, nearly blind and unable to speak English, finds himself dumped in a coffee shop. Now, the mayor of Buffalo yesterday accused US Customs and Border Patrol of unprofessional and inhumane conduct, to which the Border Patrol responds, Border Patrol agents offered him a courtesy ride, which he chose to accept, to a coffee shop determined to be a warm, safe location near his last known address.
Good Lord.
He showed no signs of distress, mobility issues, or disabilities requiring special assistance.
Apart from being almost blind.
From which one can only conclude the bar for having a disability that requires special assistance in a snowstorm must be somewhat low. So this has become a massive story, of course, in the Buffalo area, and now increasingly nationally. He was buried yesterday in a funeral service, and his family, of course, is demanding accountability from the Border Patrol agents who took that astonishing decision not to take him to the safety of his home, but to dump him in a coffee shop.
I urge people to read up even further on this story, because it is another one that you file under in the United States of America in 2026 with a heartbreaking sigh of exasperation and and disbelief. And of course, we should talk also about the fact that these sorts of stories are already less likely to be properly reported in the United States than they were a couple of years ago because of what has happened to organs like the Washington Post and broadcasters like CBS. And there is more bad news on, well, for people who care about the facts, there is more bad news on that front as well, Simon.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's very important to underscore that many of the stories that have emerged this week that have shocked the conscience have come from investigative journalists working on Substack, in the case of this Buffalo case, from local news organizations that are still operational, including local TV in Buffalo, which has done a good job with this. But we are increasingly in a post-truth reality here. And with the news last night that Netflix is walking away from its efforts to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, which means that Paramount, already the owners of CBS, already forcing CBS News to its knees before Donald Trump, is highly likely, 90% likely, to now take ownership of Warner Brothers Discovery, and the White House certainly is going to support that acquisition. Part of the bundle of things that Paramount will be acquiring is CNN. And this is the nightmare scenario for journalists at CNN who can see that, first of all, it's highly likely that, some kind of a merger between CBS News and CNN will be on the cards. But more importantly than that the Ellisons, who run Paramount and who are supportive of and have pledged fealty to Donald Trump, first in order to secure government backing to take over CBS, and now to secure government backing in order to take Warner Brothers Discovery, they will force CNN also to bend the knee before Donald Trump. I mean, that is the widely held expectation here. And if that happens before the midterm elections in November, and the pace of this, of course, is to be determined, we could well be in a situation that by the time we get to the autumn, and the midterm elections here are in their final weeks, two of America's three news channels, Fox and CNN, are bending the knee before Trump, or in the case of Fox, fully on board
fully
with the Make America Great Again agenda. Yes. And that will leave only MS Now, also, by the way, like Fox, a propaganda channel, propagandizing from the left, with nowhere in terms of 24-hour news here, at least as far as the national cable channels are concerned, for people to get anything approximating traditional, objective, down-the-line reporting from an outlet that the White House dismisses as legacy media. And that's the path we're on here. I think it's unstoppable at this point.
No wonder your clips on YouTube appearing on this programme are doing so well at the moment in the United States.
In the United States. I mean, I have to say, it's an extraordinary thing. I think people, listening to LBC may not realise that we have an increasing number of listeners and followers here in the US, and indeed one of them, I'm not sure if I told you this, James, but one of them stopped me on the Washington Underground system, a local resident here. And I was very surprised. She asked if I was who I am. Are you Simon Marks? And I said, yes. Do I know you? And she said, no, you don't know me, but I know you. Lovely. And I said, well, how? And she said, I can't wait for the next episode of you and James to come out. And I said, well, how did you find us? And she said, when the election took place, I came to the conclusion that I was not going to be able to rely on American news media any longer to tell me what's going on in my own country. So I started looking elsewhere, and the first thing I came across was LBC, and I've stuck with it. I was just floored by it. Yeah,
flawed, but also it makes some sense, doesn't it, given the story that you're telling us today and have been telling us since that election. And we should acknowledge that some journalists in America continue to fight the good fight. The New York Times this week reporting on contents of the Epstein file, with the caveat, of course, that just because an accusation is contained within those files does not by any stretch of the imagination mean that it will be later substantiated or true. But Donald Trump's repeated claim that the contents of what has been released completely exonerate him looks rather shabby when viewed through the lens of what the New York Times and others have reported this week.
Yes, and just worth underscoring, the New York Times was led to this story by the work of an independent political investigative journalist on Substack, and both the New York Times and National Public Radio then picked that up and amplified it. This relates to the fact that we know from the 3 million pages of documents that were released by the Department of Justice at the end of January, that there was this summary written up of allegations that had been brought to the attention of investigators by members of the public against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And we also know that one accuser was interviewed in 2019 by investigators. She claimed that she had been assaulted and abused by Trump and Epstein together in the 1980s, when she would have been around 13 years old. Now, there is no evidence contained in any of the allegations and the files relating to them that investigators found any of these allegations to be credible. However, thanks to the campaigning work of that independent political investigative journalist, we now know that, in fact, this woman was interviewed not once, but 4 times by investigators, and that evidence of that was included in documents that were immediately released by the Department of Justice on January the 30th. But then, in the scramble that they engaged in to pull some of these documents back that they realised they, for various reasons, should not have put into the public domain, evidence relating to the other 3 interviews with the FBI disappeared. And the way this was uncovered was by the initial journalist using the Wayback Machine, which allows you online to go and look at archived pages of the internet that no longer exist in real time. And so he discovered that not only do we already know the Department of Justice had withheld 3 million pages of other documents, but they'd actually pulled some documents back from the public database where allegations against Jeffrey Epstein and Trump were listed and some detail provided about them. So the huge question now being raised, of course, by Democrats and some dissident Republicans is, where are those documents? What do they say at a time when President Trump is claiming to be absolved entirely by the Epstein inquiry? And how are those documents going to see the light of day? This is so serious that the Department of Justice, no longer, of course, an independent institution here, we're seeing across the board systemic failure in terms of investigations relating to Epstein's affairs. The Department of Justice says that it is reviewing all of those documents to see whether any of them should in fact have been left in the public domain. So suddenly, as the Clintons are being questioned up in Chappaqua, Hillary yesterday, Bill today, suddenly the Klieg lights of attention are back on the White House, back on Attorney General Pam Bondi, as we all wonder what exactly it was in that woman's account that led the FBI to decide that they couldn't just interview her once. Wow. They needed to go and interview her 4 times, which of course raises the possibility that they thought that and it's only a possibility, that they thought her allegations were more credible than perhaps a single interview might have indicated.
Yeah, quite the week, really, for that doughty defender of women and girls, and of course victims of actual abuse to accept an invitation from Donald Trump's administration. Tommy Ten Names or Stephen Yaxley Lennon going to the United States of America this week and boasting all over social media about his connections with members of Donald Trump's regime, even as the contents of the Epstein file continue to be, well, shall we say, less than fully released. But while I have you, not on that, on the Hillary Clinton thing that you just mentioned, she used her opportunity in front of this investigation to call for Donald Trump to give evidence, which was quite a move.
It was a big move. I mean, basically her message to the committee was, I never met Epstein. I know absolutely nothing about him. I condemn all of his crimes and everything that I now know that he did, but I never met him. But I know a bloke who did. And you should really be talking to him. His name is President Donald Trump. He's mentioned thousands of times in the Epstein files. And if I were you, if this committee was serious about getting to the bottom of all of this, you would have issued an invitation to him to come and be deposed and provide evidence under oath about the nature of his friendship and relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Bill Clinton, appearing before the House Oversight Committee today, is going to have less latitude to do that because we know that Bill Clinton had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He simply denies any nefarious or criminal aspects to it. So he's going to have a much rougher ride. But Hillary Clinton's ability yesterday to kind of, again, turn the spotlight on the White House was substantial. And the other point that she made, James, which further reveals the systemic collapse that is taking place here, is that this House Oversight Committee is so blatantly politicised that at one point yesterday, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, a Trump supporter from Colorado, completely against the rules, the agreed rules of the deposition, snapped a cell phone picture of Hillary Clinton, sent it to her mate, a propaganda podcaster called Benny Johnson, who then puts it out on social media, bringing the hearing to a collapse for 30 minutes while the Clinton lawyers said, well, the rules aren't being observed here. The previous week, when Les Wexner, this billionaire businessman, very supportive of Republican causes, who had a complicated business and personal relationship with Epstein, was being deposed by the committee, only the Democrats showed up for that deposition. The Republicans wouldn't even participate in it because he was a Republican supporter. So the system here is not capable of getting to the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. That's the reality. The Department of Justice can release everything they've got, and we still won't get to the bottom of it because the independence of the Department of Justice and the institutions of law enforcement have been incinerated, and because one side or the other on Capitol Hill never has any real interest in investigating people from their own side about their relationships with the financier.
Wow. I just to put the cherry on the icing on the cake with regards to that Paramount story and CNN, the richest man in the world owns X, the second and third richest man in the world control Google, the fourth richest man owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, the fifth richest man owns the Washington Post, and now the sixth richest could soon be taking over Paramount, Warner Brothers and therefore CNN. Simon, thank you. Have a lovely weekend. No wonder people are tuning in to you on this radio station to find out what's going on in their own countries. That's a terrifying thought, even as Simon and I quietly preen ourselves about it. It is a terrifying thought, and it's happening. It's real. It's 12:52.